Claire Skillen, thank you so much for joining me for an episode of the podcast today.
It is amazing to be here, Liz. Thanks so much for hosting me today.
Well, I always start with the same question, which is how do we know each other?
This story, as you know, was a game changer for you. I remember seeing a post of yours on LinkedIn, and it was describing about the toll that, life in general, I think work and et cetera, was taking for you at the time. And it was such a brave post about vulnerability from a level of leadership that you don't typically see it from. So, Liz, you really set a tone for how important it is for leaders to be vulnerable about where they're at and why mental wellness matters for everyone. So, having read your story, I reached out to learn a little bit more about what prompted things, and you kindly agreed to jump on a call and have a conversation with someone until that point you had never met. So that is how you and I connected.
I remember that first conversation. I remember your note. And I remember that both you and I were at this interesting inflection point from a career perspective. We both had spent the majority of our careers in a particular area, our métier, and we were being called into new areas and new exploration. And as you and I have continued in our relationship and our friendship, I've had this chance to see you go on your own journey as a leader and a professional. And I'm curious, what in your working life are you most excited about right now?
Liz, there's so much to be excited about at the moment. I think sometimes an old mentor of mine said, but the whole of life is a detour, and that's what makes it so much fun. So remember to take your eyes off the maps at times because the scenery is beautiful. And I truly can't really think of a better way to describe my career path so far. And I've been really fortunate that the scenery has been amazing. There's some new pieces of scenery on the horizon, however, and one critical one is my new role as president and CEO of Plant-Based Foods Global Inc., where we are embarking on a brave and exciting pivot into the world of becoming a holding company. So we started off as a plant-based food company, and the mission was simple, really, healthier food and for people and the planet. But we learned something pretty quickly, that food alone isn't enough. We have climate change, rising costs, and supply chain disruptions. All that means that families need more than just new products. People and families need reliable systems that can grow, process, and move food where it's needed. And that's ultimately what we're working to solve as PBFG. So we have a couple of arms of the business. One is PBF Tech, which builds the infrastructure. So we have vertical gardens, drying units, etc., and controlled environment systems using patented technology. These systems grow food, preserve it, keep it, and help it move across supply chains. With trade, we move the supply. Work directly with farmers. Many of them are women-led or small co-ops. And products are direct trade, single origin, and ethically sourced. So we're very proud of the network that has been built on that side. So when we think about issues like climate change, adaptation, and food security, we have a really huge opportunity as a company to play an integral role in changing the landscape on food security, not only in Canada up here, where Canada's not even in one of the top 50 producers, but also on a global scale by helping create more resilient, adaptive, and economically sustainable communities.
That's remarkable. And there were a couple of things you said in there that stood out to me. One of them was this line, food alone isn't enough. And then there were these two words you kept using again and again, systems and process. And when I think about you and I think about everything I've known about your career and professional life up to this point, when you go into a food company, that wouldn't have been what I would have thought would be your first look. But hearing you talk about systems and processes and supply chains and how integrated all of this is, and how human-centered it is, because I think of you as someone who has always focused on putting humans at the center of systems and processes, not having the humans work for the process, but having the process work for the humans. This seems like such a natural fit, such a perfect fit for you. And so I'm curious, how have you seen already your experience and background showing up in this new space of leadership in a different industry for you? And what are you learning along the way about yourself?
As always, Liz, great questions. I think there's so much overlap between skill sets. And yes, I think a critical component of technology and systems is to put humans and the planet at the center of it, right? So we think about systems and technology, they're there to support people and the planet and not necessarily to drive things the other way around as we sometimes see, out there. I think there's a beautiful intersection with an original background in physical geography. In my case, it was climate science and biogeography with, a little bit of geomorphology and earth shaping studies thrown in for good measure. Beyond that, the blend of business and then also counseling psychology all intersects in a fascinating way in a role like this, because when you're working with people, you're working with systems, man, navigating environmental shifts and climate. There's the whole focus of the company transects all of these areas. So I'm able to, and I'm still working on finding all of those little linkages and sort of stitching them together in service of the company vision.
How do you see your training and background in counseling psychology showing up in your work now? As you know, I am this year the president of the Society of Consulting Psychology, which is a division of the American Psychological Association. And our group is focused on how we apply psychological framework, evidence backed practices, theory to help humans, individuals, teams, organizations, and ultimately systems thrive. So seeing this relationship between what psychological science and business practice have to do with one another, and then bringing that education and that training to bear in helping people to thrive in a workplace. So I'm curious, how do you, as someone with that counseling psychology training, how do you see that manifesting in your work right now?
Beautiful question, Liz. Thank you. And I think a key component is working hard to create safer spaces. Like sometimes we hear the concept of safe space, and in truth, there's really no 100% guarantee that a place is going to be safe, except that we can build trust and navigate it as a team. Safer spaces are, I think, a more accurate term. And what that means is that people feel safe to make mistakes and learn from them, have the room to try new ideas, to bring as much of themselves as possible to the workplace. So within safety, that's where, people's skills, people's confidence, ideas are afforded a proper chance to bloom. So that's one key component.
So I'm curious to hear more about your growth as a leader and stepping into this role where you are in a very public, people-facing leadership role. And that's a bit different from some of the other roles you've held over the course of your career. What's it like for you right now, stepping into this role, this new space?
Thanks, Liz. It is quite a shift in some respects for me. And at the same time, when it all comes down to it, we all have roles to play in the company. We're all aligned with core values. And that shows up across a lot of different areas. So that in conversations, in the work that we do, and I think choosing one's focus in that, lining up with values, supporting the team, speaking from the best information I have available, and being curious. I think being curious is an essential attribute in this role. I think another piece is time for reflection. not only on company direction, that, how did I handle that piece, and continuously being willing to learn. When you step into a new space like this, you reveal new parts of yourself, as I'm sure many leaders can relate to. The question remains is, what do you do with that? How do you reflect on that? What might you shift or do more of? Right? So sometimes when you step into a new role, you can find you're shown where more work is, or, okay, great. I am glad that this piece or this aspect of myself is serving not only myself, but the team well and the relationships that we're looking to build. So staying curious, staying open and agile in your learning journey, and aligned. So open, agile, curious, and aligned, I think, are some key foundation stones for me thus far in my role, which I've been in for a total of about 5 weeks now.
And you're off to a fantastic start. As you were talking about that, it resonated with me absolutely. It is very easy to talk about. It's easy to talk about reflecting. It's easy to sort of talk about considering values and weighing different things against one another as we make decisions. And it's another thing to actually carve out the space to do it. What are some of your practices that help you to do that type of introspection, reflection, and really help to think through the different challenges and opportunities that you're encountering in your role?
Business in general, pace always seems to be that 100 plus miles an hour. So how do you create moments or micro pauses to really cement some of the reflection? And some of the practices that I find help is scheduling about a 5-minute pause between meetings. That gives me a chance to, whether that's to do some breath work for reset, for body reset, which is important. It may give me a chance to write some notes in a journal on things that I do want to reflect on later or near the end of the day when I have a bit more bandwidth to do so. Or it may also cause me to write some notes around who I need to connect with and get some feedback from. I think as leaders, it's important to connect in with your teams and get the simple feedback of, what do I need to be doing more of? What do I need to be doing less of? And figure out what that transition from current state to new practice looks like. The other piece for me is getting by the water and some simple mindfulness. And that, of course, is going to look different for everyone. But the neat part is that you're able to take a measured approach to that, and that, perhaps the morning of journaling, you might need, 30 minutes or so. But breath work, you can create a shift within 1 to 2 minutes. So even in within your day, there's lots of different ways to pause, build out some of the needed reflection, and create space for it at different times.
You mentioned water. I'm curious, how did you develop your love of the water, and how does it play a role in your life now?
Beautiful question. And I think I've always loved the water. I have early memories being a kid sitting in the tide pools. And I think so my connection with the water began at a very young age. So for me, the ocean functions as not only a system reset, but it's also a spiritual thing for me. That's how I connect to source. And so I find it incredibly grounding. I also find that I clear my head and I'm allowed sort of a free flow of thought process that allows me to download and integrate all the new information from the day.
What does success look like for you right now as a leader?
There's some things that I ask myself as measures. One of them are, do people feel comfortable speaking up? If my team feels comfortable speaking up and telling me whatever's on their mind, even if it's not necessarily the good news, me being in tune with what my individual team members are wanting, both from a goals perspective, dreams perspective, growth perspective, staying in tune and keeping that in mind, and thinking of opportunities to align them as much as possible to those things is also something that constantly runs in the background of my mind. Think it's also creating a safer space to reflect. So are we able to take our learnings, integrate them and apply them? And how effective are we and me in doing that? So those are three of several things that I keep running in the background.
How are you making these spaces? What does that look like for you in practice?
Think through conversation. It's easy when you connect at a meeting to focus on what you need to get done. It's carving out time. And it's in some cases you can't be, in person face to face with someone, but it's face to face on video. Carving out time to connect people with purpose, connect people with passion, and creating the space for that reflection backwards. So honestly, it's setting a boundary around time. Yes, we need to accomplish these tasks, and we need updates on those things, but it's holding that space for time to go through and connect with those other pieces, or to touch base on where people are at. Like talk about how people are feeling, right? If we keep powering through, there's that buildup. Just like going by the ocean requires a reset, we need to create the space for our people to do a reset and a reconnect where we find there's disconnect.
So you said something really important about the connection of purpose to day-to-day activity. And that's something that I always tried to really focus on when I was in professional services, especially for the less tenured, more junior members of my team. It would be very difficult to equate the day-to-day spreadsheet work that they were doing with this rather grand purpose statement that the overall organization had. And the purpose statement was incredibly inspiring, but
Sure.
also didn't feel particularly tangible. And it was helping people to connect how is what you are doing today in what may seem like a very mundane type of task. How is that actually contributing to this much bigger, broader, frankly, grander vision and purpose? And in your business in particular, I mean, it's very inspiring. I mean, what you're doing and how you're going about it. When I think about you, I think about Joni, other people that I know who are in this really transformational agricultural and food space. The vision is impactful and it's inspiring. And as you also described, there are a lot of very basic routine tasks that are required as part of supply chain management. So I'm curious, how do you see yourself as the senior leader in this organization in a role where you are helping people to connect their day-to-day jobs with this much bigger vision of what you're trying to accomplish as a whole?
That a key function of a leader is to do exactly that, is to bridge with what might appear to be the smallest task to the biggest piece of the vision and all the steps in between. When we go back to that favorite word of ours, system, it's that communication of interconnectivity of tasks. So for example, if I were to talk about, a particular piece of technology and just writing up a profile on that, how does doing some research and writing up a profile on a piece of technology help us achieve our vision? Well, that information helps us decide whether a technology lines up with where we're going. And if it does, then it helps the next layer up of decisions. It helps us quantify the type of impact that a specific technology could have across a number of business areas or aspects. So if a technology profile is written up and it helps us determine that there's an alignment, then we have an opportunity to quantify the potential impact from a company, from a purpose perspective. So the simple act of writing up a profile might actually change the landscape of the business portfolio. It may actually have a ripple effect into helping farmers save water, for example. It may also prove to generate a profit for the company as well as the farmers. So it's communicating that ripple effect and understanding those different layers of measure earlier you spoke about metrics, and a key piece about metrics is understanding that there's many layers of those. And tasks in essence are no different. They feed into one another. And so being able to draw those lines or to stitch those pieces of fabric together for those that are completing tasks that might appear to be inconsequential but are far from it is a critical part of the role.
There's a word that's come up several times now that I want to dig into a bit more, and that is
Sure.
boundaries. I think one of my favorite phrases is that happiness is well managed expectations. And to me, managing expectations is an extension of having good boundaries. And I'm curious, how are you redefining what boundaries mean for you in this role? How are you looking at setting boundaries? And also, something I think is a really important role of a leader is that social learning aspect, that modeling behavior, where how you set and maintain boundaries directly tells your people how they have really the permission to do that for themselves. And so I'm curious to hear more about how you are thinking about boundaries. What does that word mean to you? And then how do you apply it in your life, both as a C suite leader, but also just as a human with a life?
As always, there's a balance and a dance between all aspects, Liz. And boundaries, obviously surface when there's an event that comes up. A boundaries provides information on how I or a team or a company is going to choose to respond, right? And so when I think about boundaries within myself in a role like this, I have a duty for self-care. If I don't take care of myself, and we know this from psychology as well, just as the same I would as a counselor, I have an ethical duty to care for myself so that I can care for the people around me, right? Whether that's clients, whether that's a team. So I need to ensure that I set self-care boundaries around ensuring I get adequate sleep, that I look after myself, that I get some time by the water, that I get some fitness routine in there, and that I, of course, eat nutritional food, right? Those are some of the basics. When it comes to the time that we spend on tasks, we have to be really honest with ourselves, not only as myself as a leader, but also as a team around this particular task right now. How does this line up with where we're going? Is it worth saying yes to in terms of the value it's going to provide in moving us towards a particular direction? Is that actually lined up with what we've agreed are the priorities right now, or has it shifted, and do we need to change how we're viewing it? So I refer to this a lot as an energy audit. Am I putting my energy in the right place? Am I helping the team and working with the team to collectively decide where we're allocating our energies? Because it's easy to say yes to a lot of things and sometimes harder to say no. So asking that question of what are we saying no to, so that our energy is focused on where we need to go and building out a vision and managing our own energy and experience and well-being throughout the process. That's a critical piece.
So, something that has come up earlier in this conversation, and I know something that you and I have talked about frequently just in our own conversations, is vulnerability. And I'm curious for you now as a leader and as a very public facing leadership role, what is what does vulnerability mean for you right now? And how are you being a vulnerable leader? And how are you encouraging others to express their own vulnerability?
Part of that comes down to the space that we or the environment that we collectively create as a team. And going back to that concept of safer spaces. So like feeling safe to make a mistake, knowing that there isn't shame in doing so, and that there's an opportunity to learn, to connect to concepts from our earlier piece on boundaries as being consistent in that as well. I think being able to say that you don't know something, but trusting in your ability to figure it out. There are more leaders than I can even count that have told me trusting in your ability to figure things out. And another piece of that is trusting in your team's ability to figure things out as well. So it's okay not to know things. It's okay to make mistakes. When we think about the difference between failure and mistakes are rarely catastrophic, right? So a key piece is to not let the energy around mistakes from the outside get inside of us, because one mistake very, very rarely, if ever, defines you as a human being. And that goes for any member on your team as well. So part of creating a safer space is to be open about some of the mistakes that you've made, what you've learned, where you need to grow right now, what you need to learn. And per your point, to model that with your team. It's not always about what happens to you, but how you collectively respond to it. And so separating yourselves from events to a point and understanding that showing who you are comes in your response and how you manage it after it happens. You can't mitigate everything. And being open and owning and accountable as things surface.
When I think of someone who finds the fun in hard challenges, Claire, that is you. So in that, you brought up something really important, which is that we don't have all the answers, and communicating with others, reaching out to others, hearing others' opinions, perspectives, points of view, how they challenge us. It's all really critical to solving the challenges we have and really capitalizing on the opportunities in front of us. So I am curious, who do you want to be talking to right now? And who do you want to reach out to you?
Thanks, Liz. I think from the focus of PBFG, we're passionate about connecting with people that have a similar type of vision and are keen to have a similar impact on the world. We're also keen to connect with people that see the opportunity in what we're creating and managing an entire system with many business verticals contained within each. We want people that are passionate about resilient communities, climate adaptation, food security, building a profitable company that's anchored in fundamentally core values that put people and planet at the center. So we welcome any interests from those lenses. And we're always open to entertaining a conversation because, as we shared earlier on in our talk, you never know what can transpire from the people that you connect with.
No, and I think our friendship goes to prove that.
It certainly does, and I'm so grateful for it, Liz.
I'm grateful for our friendship. Claire, I'm grateful for you, and I am excited. I am excited about what you are building and the transformation that you and your team are undertaking at Plant-Based Foods Global. It's incredible, and really, I think, goes to show that there is an art to reinvention just as much as there is a science. And as you bring together people, you bring together process, you bring together systems, you create space for new systems to emerge. I agree with you. I don't know that there's anything to not be excited about for the future of this endeavor.
100%, Liz. And I think, again, a key piece is a balance between staying open, curious, agile, resilient, empathetic, and yet focused at the same time. So as a company, those are things that we all that we're keeping in mind as we navigate this amazing journey that we've embarked upon. From a leadership perspective, I'm always learning and growing as a leader. And one of my favorite reads at the moment is Leader is Healer by Nicholas Johnny. If you haven't had a chance to read that book, it's so far embodies the leader that I am aiming my best to grow into, and some traits I'm grateful that I already demonstrate. As always, there's room for growth.
There is room for growth. Claire, thank you so much for coming along for this conversation.
Thank you, Liz, for hosting again. It was great to connect with you, and a big shout out, massive hugs to you.
Big hugs. Thanks again.
You bet.